So today I thought I'd talk a little bit more about protein because protein gets a lot of attention in the health, fitness, and wellness space. However, there's unfortunately a lot of mixed messages surrounding this nutrient. So I thought today I'd bust a few very popular myths about protein. So myth number one, and this is a very common myth and really important to debunk really, and that is that protein is only necessary or something that you need to be worrying about if you are exercising. Now this is really far from the truth because yes, protein is important when we're exercising for muscle recovery and building, but on top of that, protein is super important for a lot of bodily functions, like for example, bone health, skin health, immunity, hormones, enzymes, and so forth. So we definitely need to be focusing on protein, not just for exercise, but for general health and well-being as well. So the second myth is that a high protein diet is actually harmful to your kidneys or your liver. Now, if you have a diagnosed problem or disease or illness with your kidneys or liver, then yes, protein actually might be harmful, and following a lower protein diet may be recommended, but this is under medical or dietetic supervision, of course. But in general, if you have healthy kidneys and your liver is not affected by any specific health conditions, a high protein diet won't actually harm your kidneys or your liver. So the third myth is actually quite an interesting one, and this is where people believe that protein may be harmful to your bones, actually, because protein is seen as acidic, which then leads to the leaching of calcium out of your bones into your urine, which then gets excreted. So you lose calcium that way. And this is from the popular alkaline diet theory or alkaline theory. However, there's really very little research backing this alkaline theory because we see that the body really tightly regulates the pH of the blood. And what we do in terms of diet really has a very little impact on that because of the fact that the pH needs to be tightly regulated for bodily functions and health in general. So research actually shows that having a proper amount of protein, even sometimes a little bit higher protein in the diet, actually has a more positive effect on the bones than a negative effect. So the alkaline theory and protein being acidic actually is a myth that we can debunk. The fourth myth is that vegans or vegetarians can't get enough of protein in their diet because of the fact that they are following a plant-based diet. Now, this is definitely a myth because we see that with vegans and vegetarians, they're actually a lot more focused on making sure that they are getting in sufficient amount of protein than compared to someone that's not following a plant-based diet and just eating as they want. So they're a lot more conscious of their protein intake, which is a good thing. However, there's a lot of plant-based sources that have great protein sources in them, like for example your nuts and seeds, legumes like chickpeas, lentils, things like tofu or soy products and so forth, pea protein and the works really have enough protein in them to supply the sufficient amount of protein to vegans and vegetarians. The next myth is also very popular among bodybuilders or even people really focusing on building muscle. And it's quite interesting to see that, yes, we know protein is super, super important for building muscle because it forms the building blocks of building muscle, yes. But the body actually reaches a plateau where if you consume anything additional in terms of protein on top of what it's needed, it actually doesn't use it to build muscle and actually sometimes even converts it to fat. So overdoing it in terms of protein because you want to be building loads of muscle is actually not very beneficial in terms of your goal of building more muscle and leaning down in terms of fat. So research actually shows that we try and aim for about 20 to 40 grams of protein every 3 to 4 hours if we are actively focusing on building muscle. For example, if you think about a protein shake, usually it's around 20 to 21 grams of protein per protein shake. So that's typically why it's easy to just consume a protein shake after training to get in that dose of protein. But if you think about it in the form of foods, that would typically be about 90 grams piece of meat, for example, or it would be 3 eggs. And so forth. So that is quite an easy way to think about it, 20 to 40 grams. If you're unsure about the amount of protein in the foods that you eat, we do recommend looking at something like Fat Secret app or MyFitnessPal because it actually gives a lot of insight in terms of the amount of protein in a product. Let's say you want to see how much protein is in tofu or in nuts or seeds and the work. So you can definitely look at that. But overdoing it in terms of protein because you're trying to build muscle is not necessary, and it actually might be increasing your weight in terms of fat, which is not something we want. So the last myth is that we need to be consuming protein ASAP after training. Now, this is a very common myth where we see that we need to pump the protein shake straight after training if we want to get proper building of muscle and recovery. And that's actually not necessary. We see that physiologically, the body actually, in terms of muscle building, peaks within 3 hours after training, and then even carries on up to 24 hours after that training session. So you have about 24 hours to consume protein to actually recover and build muscle optimally from that training session. So it's really not necessary to go out of your way to consume maybe even unhealthy proteins because you need to get that protein in after your training session, let's say half an hour afterwards. Now, when it comes to training multiple times in a day, let's say you are training for a triathlon, for example, you need to do a session in the morning and in the afternoon, then yes, having a protein maybe closer to the training session in the morning will be optimal, because then there will be faster recovery for that next session, which is in the afternoon. So in general, rule of thumb, if you have 24 hours to recover from your training session, so you train this morning and you're only training tomorrow morning again, you don't need to be focusing ridiculously on making sure you're getting in that protein straight after training. If you are going to eat normally throughout the day and you're making sure you are having your protein portions at your meals, and if you are having snacks, then that should be sufficient. But if you are having a training session within 24 hours after your initial training session, then yes, maybe concentrating on something that is a faster release protein, or really focusing on getting in that protein straight after training might be beneficial. So there, something like a protein shake might come in handy, but be sure to use that in conjunction with your diet, because if you're having a lot of protein shakes on top of your diet, it actually may contribute to gaining weight. So it's a really fine line that we need to reach. So yeah, that's the 6 myths about protein. I think a lot of people do tend to find these myths when they read up a bit about protein or talk to friends or whatever the case may be. So if you have any questions, please reach out to us, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one.